Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to be continuing my kill team painting series thing, where I'm just basically really enjoying painting up kill teams from the new edition of the game. And we've got the new starter box, which Games Workshop sent us through for review, which features some of the older Space Marines heroes kill teams. So we've got the Marines and we've got the Death Guard, alongside that new MDF scenery. And I couldn't decide which one to do, and I thought, well, I haven't done Nurgle stuff for ages, and it's one of my favourite things to paint, so let's have a go with the Death Guard. And it also felt it was a really good opportunity for me to try and learn how to try and speed up my painting a little bit, see if I could get some more satisfaction from it, try a few different techniques out. There's no real pressure on them. This is stuff for me for gaming. I'm really enjoying gaming with Kill Team at the minute, and I just want to build my stable of kill teams up. So I thought, ton of fun. Let's take some Death Guard, let's do a bunch of kit bashing, see if I can work out a scheme I like. And here's what we got. Let's paint. The miniatures that you get in the box, like I mentioned, are the Space Marines Heroes ranges that used to get in those little blind box type foily pouch type things. And consequently, they've got these sprues which are designed where you can just push them out. You don't have to clip them out. I am clipping them out because I want a nice flush cut and I want to clean them up. But I must admit, I do think these push fit things, coupled with the push fit MDF scenery, it's certainly a very accessible new starter box. I don't hate that at all. But the Death Guard, I think it is wonderful, the design direction they went with these guys when they brought them out as the like headline baddies for the sort of, not relaunch of 40k, but when they introduced Primaris and whatnot. They are just a touch too cartoony for my taste. I don't think they're bad, they're just not quite, I don't know, dark enough for my taste. So I just wanted to do a little bit of trimming, a little bit of cleaning up on them, and just remove, like, there is a ton of stuff, like all little details and greebles all over them. They're incredibly individual, these miniatures, and if you like it, great. And I would much rather be in a place where I'm having to remove bits rather than, running around to try and find them. But just, things like decorations on the hilts of weapons, stuff hanging off, 1,000,001 different horns. I'm tidying them up partly to clean up the silhouette and the look and make them a little bit more serious, for want of a better term, which I know is nonsense, in this game. But also just speed up the painting as well, because if there's not quite so much stuff on them, then there's not quite so much stuff for me to have to paint. With these push fit models, I find one of the necessary steps is to trim the pegs as well. I find that you don't quite get a flush join if you leave the pegs in. They seem to sort of force them apart slightly. So I always trim those down. The other nice thing about when we're painting Nurgle stuff is glue is your friend. Plastic glue will hide all manner of ills. So smush them together, run a bit of the extra thin stuff down, and you'll be laughing. So once I had trimmed up and removed various bits and bobs, I wanted to, just wanted to do a bit of kit bashing, really, just enjoy myself. I say Nurgle is something I've always loved painting. I've had several Nurgle armies for different systems, and I dived into my fairly considerable Chaos bits box and just started to play around and see what I could come up with. And I really like the idea of giving them some sort of these medieval type weaponry, making them pretty gnarly. Tried this axe, wasn't quite right, and then found on that Legionnaire sprue the mace head, which I thought was perfect. The sorcerer actually was one of the biggest, I suppose, kit bashes I did. None of this is particularly difficult. It's all just trimming and deciding what you want. But I was really pleased with how he came out, to be fair. And I must say that the thing that I disliked the most was the splooge gun, whatever it's called. I've no idea, but what I'm assuming should be like a chemical flamer or something. So that had to go. And I was umming and ahhing about what could I use to replace it with, and I got out that Witch Hunters type Zealot model with the flamer. That was quite a cool idea, but that couldn't quite work. And then I thought, where have I got some sort of Guard-style flamers, Imperial Guard-style flamers? And if you watching earlier this year, you know that I went pretty deep into Solar Auxilia. I have quite a lot of those kits. And one of them contains, the Sentinel kit contains Heavy Flamer, which, because it's a Sentinel for regular humans, is just about the right size for these enormous Death Guard Marines, because they're super bloated. They're really big lads, these Marines. And I was like, oh yeah, I think that'll bit of snipping here and there. I think that could look pretty cool. And then other than that, so it's just weaponry and head swaps really, and it can make such an enormous difference to the silhouette, but also that, for me anyway, that sense of kind of ownership of the miniatures. And one of the things I love about Kill Team, about the potential, I guess, of Kill Team, is being able to do that thing where, you know, every miniature's a character, you know every model's name, you can do all these special little bits of detail. One of the bits I was really looking forward to trying was the new Mark III plastic helmets on them. I think they look perfect for these guys, but I needed to weather up these bits I was adding in. So I was using a hobby knife and all the rest of it, but actually I found that my thumbnail was a really useful tool for making dents and damage to the armour. Some places where the knife would perhaps give too sharp a cut, I found that just pushing the thumbnail in worked really nicely. I've got to say I'm really quite proud of the kit bashing I've done with these. I think it's ended up with the models looking fairly stock, and I say blending in the pieces that weren't sculpted to be Death Guard things, and making them fit in. I actually think on the whole it came out really, really, really well. And I don't often do much kit bashing anymore. It's something I used to absolutely adore doing. So I think we need to find a way back to bringing that into some of the videos on the channel. I'm really hoping Kill Team is that way. So you see these guys, all I've done, other than snipping a few bits off here and there, namely things like Nurglings and the stuff I mentioned earlier, I've just added a couple of the Mark III heads on there. You'll know if you've watched that video when that kit came out, I think it's my favourite Space Marines kit. So it was a really nice opportunity to use them, but because they've got that little spike on the top, it just felt like such an obvious like switch, and the head obviously such a focal point, makes an enormous difference to how the miniature looks and the mood of the miniature. All the heads that you get, and you do get an unhelmeted and a helmeted head with all of the models here generally, or you get two head options anyway. They are that bit too cartoony for me. So this head swap was such a simple way to bring it back towards the aesthetic that I wanted to try and achieve for my minis. I'd say the mace head on this, really, really happy with that. That's from the Legionnaire sprue from AOS. The Sergeant model, this was a little bit more involved. I just felt the plague sword on him was a bit too like a little fencer's blade, which I get it. It's a plague sword, I get, but it just didn't look right on the Marine, in my opinion. So I found this blade was on its own in the bits box. Couldn't figure out where it was from, so I had to go on the site and start hunting through. And in the end, turns out it's from a core model. I think it was the one that you got free with White Dwarf years ago when they came out. Possibly my favourite conversion, this one. Got to have that gnarly rebreather head on your flamer dudes, in my opinion. It's iconic. And as I say, the Solar Auxilia heavy flamer, just fitted so well with so little chopping. I say no putty or anything, bit of plastic glue, smush it together, you'll be fine. It's Nurgle as well, so not gonna overly stress. And then you've got the Sorcerer, I guess sensibly the leader of the kill team, so I needed him to be cool. I really ummed and ahed about the head on this guy. In the end, I went with it. It's from the Night Lord's kill team. I think it's come out really cool. It's not maybe typical Nurgle, but I think works. Old Lance from a Warhammer Fantasy Chaos Knight. And then, yeah, the hand. It's finding a left hand that was open was very, very difficult. And in the end, Andy painted up Glutos a few years ago for Golden Demon, and he gave me the sprue with the leftovers on. So that was in the bits box, and I found that little withered hand in there, which I thought would look pretty gnarly. And then for the standard bearer, I don't know what you call him, the icon bearer, whatever, I found the old out of production Death Guard Sorcerer's back banner, and actually that model was a big inspiration for this whole project, to be honest. So there was a lovely bit of serendipity, I guess, whatever, with that, so I was really pleased with that. Now, on to actually painting. As I mentioned in the intro, I wanted to use this as an opportunity to try a few different things out and try and find my groove for speed painting. But these are pretty busy miniatures, and I was struggling to see a way through painting them. I did not leave myself time enough to do a proper tester, which will come back to bite me in a little while. So I thought, let's start with a zenithal highlight, a simple white over black, spray top down, just show me where the details are, show me where the points of interest on the miniature might be, to give me an opportunity to focus on them. later on. So this was absolutely not essential as a pre-shade stage. This was very much just me looking at it and trying to understand the miniature a bit better. I thin it down, Tamiya X20A thinner, thin down Tamiya XF2 flat white. It's my go-to for pre-shading or zenithals or anything like that. Apply it in a few different, few layers. You see the difference there between layer 1 and layer 2. A bit more intense white. Obviously, it's going to help us from a pre-shade point of view, but say it wasn't essential for it at all. Now, I wanted to go for a slightly yellowy green look to the armour. So I dug through my bag of green paints. I was like, okay, nice boring browny green for the shadow colour. DEATHGUARD Drab, absolutely perfect. Thin this with normal airbrush thinner. I'm spraying about 20 to 25 psi. I'm using our Harder and Steenbeck Infinity, which has a 0.4mm needle and nozzle in it. I'm thinning this, I don't know, 2 drops of thinner to paint, something like that, enough to get it through without it speckling or anything like that. But also the paint isn't so dilute that it's just running off everywhere. You're going to need to adjust that depending on what your setup is at home, but that's where I'm working from on them. Now for the first highlight colour, I've gone for this Elysian Green. It's actually really nice, and I think if I was just doing green, just like straight up green, I think this is a really, really good combo of 2 paints. And I think if you did a more deliberate pre-shade, you could get a really nice finish from it. But as I said, I wanted to go a little bit more yellow. So I found this Hobgrot Hide, and whilst it's a very similar value to the green, so it's not really adding a highlight as it were, it is obviously going to introduce a different tone into the paint. So we can still use that to create an area of interest on the miniature. So you can see with the highlight areas, I'm just focusing in on a smaller area on the miniature. I'm trying to make sure it makes sense, but equally, I'm really not over worrying. The airbrushing stage is not a particularly important point in this paint job. You could achieve a very similar result with a paintbrush or a hairy brush or a rattle can, whatever. But you can see the difference that yellow has made to the one on the left to the one on the right. And it was, yeah, really, I was very, very happy with that. It was exactly the sort of tone I was going for. So now I wanted to try out something, not so much dot filtering, which is a technique that I enjoy using, and you may well have seen in previous videos, but basically trying to use dot filtering in that sense of, we're going to use dots of oil on it to change the tone and the hues and stuff that's on the armour, but also introduce a bunch of weathering and just grunge it up. So all I'm going to do is, flick it on the model. You can see I've got my 2 oil paints there. I popped on a little bit of cardboard to act as the palette. And then in my dish, I had a tiny amount of mineral spirits just to thin them down enough so that they would flick off. You can see here as I'm doing it and just, spackle all over the model. And I went for the darker green, so the industrial earth first, and then I went for the yellow over the top. As I said, it was designed to give an effect. It wasn't meant to directly represent sort of anything. I just thought it would look a bit disgusting. Which I think it does, and interesting. And again, this was the whole point. How can I paint these models quickly and still be satisfied with how they look? So now I'm going to go in with a little bit of thinner on the brush and just start streaking a lot of those dots. A lot, not all. Again, this was simply to add texture and interest to the armour itself. Marines, even these gribbly ones, the armour's such a huge part of that model. You really want to get it right, because that's the bit you're going to see. And there you can see, compared to the model that hasn't got the oils on, it's completely changed it. And I really, really liked it at this point. I was properly excited for this project at this point. I was really happy with my kitbashes, and I thought, this is amazing. I wanted a yellowy green. You've absolutely smashed it. Really, really proud. Texting, people, I'm smashing this scheme out this week. It's going to look awesome. And then I did the following step and was full of regret. What I felt it needed now was something dark to reinforce the shadows, to create plenty of definition. Something I always worry about when I'm painting is my model's looking a little bit too boring on the table. So I wanted to push that contrast in the shadows, make sure all the panel lines, everything like that were nice and dark, plenty of that. So I gave the models a couple of coats of gloss varnish. That's polyurethane gloss you see me using there. Use whatever you like. The job for this was to reduce the surface tension. And because I was going to use oil paint and mineral spirits, I didn't want to reactivate all those oil dots that I had done previously. If I'd left them a few days to dry, it wouldn't be an issue, but I wasn't. I was filming, so I needed to crack on. So in the end, I ended up making quite a thick oil wash here. So I've probably gone about 50-50 with thinner to oil paint, and I've used normal DIY store mineral spirits here for this because they evaporate quicker. That's why I use them for the videos. And you can see there on that bit of plastic, that's a thick wash. It's not particularly see-through, so when that's going to go on the model, it's going to obscure what's underneath. That was probably the first issue, is that it was too dark. But I thought, I'm going to put it all over and then maybe do a bit of that reductive thing and remove it a bit, which I suppose was a fine idea to begin with. The biggest issue I've got here is it's the wrong colour. I've used the industrial earth, I've used the green, I've already used that with the dots and the streaks, and it's not really dark enough to really push those shadows. So what I should have done, in my opinion, here I am cleaning a little bit off some of the highlights, like I said, that reductive idea, you remove some of it. What I should have done is simply waited till later on in the scheme and done a little bit of pin washing with a really, really dark brown. And that I would then have achieved that goal of adding a bit of contrast and definition to the panels, but I wouldn't have basically annihilated all that lovely effect I had got from the previous stages. So a little demoralizing, but I'd done it to all of them. As I said, I hadn't done a tester. More fool me. I just wanted to try and get this whole kill team done for the video, and yeah, this is where we ended up. But we are not going to let that derail us. There's far too much else to paint on these models. All is not lost. Let's see if I can still achieve something with them. So I thought, right, let's try a new metal recipe out. I wanted quite a pale sort of brass colour. So I ended up mixing a metal colour series paint and a Games Workshop paint. This is something I do for certain gold colours and certain silver colours, and it's always worked really, really well. I get the properties like the fluidity of the metal colour series paint. Generally, I get the nice sort of metallic finish that I like from a lot of the Games Workshop paints. So that's what I applied all over. Now, for the brass, bronze parts of the model, and also for the steel parts of the model, I have thought to myself, right, I've done these videos on corrosion. I've done rust, I've done verdigris, I've done soggy, old, rotten wood. Why don't I just use them? You know, that's what they're there for, right? So I will link up in the top a much longer, purely dedicated video to each stage, essentially, that I'm showing you here, sort of in brief, on the miniature, which goes into, as I said, painting up corroded, rusty metal, painted up, corroded, oxidized, sort of a verdigris, and several of those sort of effects, because you know they're tutorials that I'm really pleased with, that we've done in the past, and actually they work perfectly for this. So I don't need to try and reinvent the wheel with that. And I also think that's worth sort of pointing out, is that it's very difficult to try and achieve absolutely everything in one project. So whilst I wanted to try some new things, if I was going to get this done in a decent amount of time, it's okay to fall back, you know, on certain recipes. Certain techniques, you know, there's no need to completely change absolutely everything you do on one thing. For the plague knives and a couple of the other weapons, I wanted a really, really disgusting sort of rusted up feel. So corrosion, typhus corrosion, it's a great little texture paint. Going to slop that all over, and we'll push it even further with the weathering stage later on. Now, as I mentioned before, these miniatures are all very, very individual, and whilst they have a bunch of details on them, they nearly always won't all have that same detail. So there might be maggots on one, there might be boils on another, there might be cloth on this one, there might, you know, I must say it made batch painting them actually quite tricky, because the amount of times I would have to go back because I'd forgotten or I'd missed a bit on one of the models. Quite frustrating, actually. Another one I've done recently, Bone, I will link up in the top. Really enjoyed that video. You guys seem to have quite enjoyed it as well. So again, I will link that up in the top, and that's a full focused video on how I've done the bone, and the same with this rotten wood that's on a couple of the bolters. A detail I absolutely love. I wish they had pushed it a little bit further, actually, with the Death Guard. I think featuring sort of wooden elements is just, feels very 40k to me. I really do enjoy it. But yeah, a lot of these individual details just made it quite time consuming to get through. But I went through and did what I could where I felt that they were the same on all the miniatures. And I felt they were already starting to look a little bit boring, which was concerning me. But they've got loads of these fleshy bits and boils and tentacles and stuff all over them. And in the back of my head, I thought that's where I'm going to bring something that's going to really pop on the table. That coupled with perhaps some quite extreme weathering colours like verdigris and rust, I reckon that was going to make it interesting enough. And this is where we go from not a complete disaster, but a bit of disappointment with the armour. I was suddenly finding a new little technique here that I was loving doing, and I will use on a lot of projects going forwards. So I'm going to use Rakarth Flesh, and I'm going to base coat all the sort of fleshy areas with it. I'm using this thin down on my wet palette quite a lot, probably close to 1 drop of water to paint. As you can see as I put it on, it's quite see-through, but I'm quite happy for it to be leaving some of that grey showing through underneath, because it just desaturates everything and gives it this lovely creepy sort of illustrative look, in my opinion. And I wanted to try and use contrast paints because, you know, they are designed for getting through work quicker. I use them occasionally large in the airbrush, to be honest with you. I thought, right, what can I do with using them, you know, with the paintbrush? So I picked Guilliman Flesh because it was a nice pinky flesh. I thought that's going to look pretty gross next to the rest of the model. Again, applying it in thinned coats. So applying it exactly as a contrast paint here. So I want it to stain the surface and to deepen the shadows, but I want to try and achieve it in a couple of coats just to get a slightly smoother finish. Now I'm going to mix the contrast paint with the Rakarth Flesh and go in and re-highlight. So draw some dashes and stuff, create some texture on his tentacles, but also just highlight certain raised areas. And I really like doing these sort of pinky flesh colours for Nurgle. You don't often see it, and I think it's a great look, and I think it makes it look properly disgusting. And then I went in with some Flesh Terror's red contrast, again watered down, just to pick out, you know, a few of the darker recesses and details like his eyes and his teeth, that sort of thing. But yeah, this was an important step, this one. I was feeling positive about the project again. You know, if it had been a personal project, I'd probably have stripped them and started again. I've got to do it for the video, so there was no time. I just had to get going. So we needed to make the best of it. And then for all the little boils and stuff, I just used Plaguebearer Flesh contrast. And I did exactly the same recipe for all the various tongues and tentacles and stuff that are on the model. So I was feeling pretty confident after doing this, and I thought, okay, well, how are we going to address some of these really large boils, these details that break up those big areas of just plain armour colour? Essentially, I'm going to use the same paints here and the same technique. I'm using the Rakarth Flesh again. I'm building it up in thin layers, so creating light and shadow, almost like a pre-shade. This time round, I'll use Plaguebearer Flesh as the main colour on it. Beautiful contrast paint, perfect for slime. I always like it when the names fit what I'm trying to do as well. So here I start to use Flesh Terror's red contrast. I may have used Guilliman Flesh for the first coat. I can't remember, if I'm absolutely honest with you, because they were both on my palette. But certainly for the second coats, I started applying more of the Flesh Terror's red just to get that really gross, kind of pussy, boily look. And yeah, these are brilliant models. Fungus. This really threw me. And I must admit, probably more than any model I can remember, I was referencing the box art a lot for these guys. Not necessarily for colours, but simply to try and recognise all the flipping details that were over these models. But the Flamer dude has this weird fungal growth stuff. Kind of like that cordyceps, is it? I don't know what it's called. That mushroom thing. Actually, one of the others has got a really creepy version of that. It's more like a tree. But anyway, fungus. I thought this is a great opportunity to find another area of the miniature to put that bright, eye-catching bit of colour on. But I was still staying within that kind of green and maybe slightly pinky flesh stuff. I didn't want to stray too far from those sorts of colours. I kind of went back into my shell a bit, if I'm honest, at this point, in sort of limited palette, that type of things. But it meant that I was confident, and it meant that I was keeping the project going. Said, as I mentioned before, I think if I tried to do too many different things, this was very, very close to sort of derailing. So gave it a coat of the Mantis Warriors, and then I've gone in with the Tesseract Glow, which is a technical paint. I think it's a contrast paint now, and it's basically a fluorescent ink. So again, heavily watered down. I just wanted this to wash into the recesses and give just a bit of a creepy look. I wasn't attempting to do OSL here or anything like that. Just wanted it to just look a bit weird, which I absolutely think it ended up doing, and I was very, very pleased. And it meant that you know, the Flamer guy had this lovely sort of eye-catching point of difference. And again, it gave me some confidence that once I did bits like that on the other models, they would start to look a bit more interesting. Now, I had got a little bit sloppy with my metallics, particularly the trim, because I used a different mix I hadn't used before. As I mentioned, that copper and gold mix. And it meant there were certain areas where I had gone onto the armour rather than the trim. So I just wanted to tidy that up a bit. And I'm using a little bit of weathering here to do that with. I've just taken a brown. This is dark rust, but you could use any sort of brown colour. Dark reddy brown colour would work nice against the green. And I'm just going in, and anywhere I've got spilled out onto the armour, I just start to paint a sort of random patch of this corrosion. This was particularly tricky because I'd have loved to have done tons of this on the model and then gone in with lighter greens and done a bunch of chipping with the light greens and all that stuff that I normally would do. But I was really trying to force myself, no, give yourself 1 minute a model. What you can get on there, you get on there. Make it all impactful. Everything there is very, very deliberate, and go with it. So areas that were a bit boring, I just painted a few more sort of dots and scratches on. So now I gave the model a coat of matte varnish. This is so to unify the finish on the miniature, because contrast has a particularly strange sort of finish to it. You may have noticed earlier, after we had done the oil stage, I matted the model back as well. That was purely because painting over a glossy surface is quite tricky. This one was deliberate and was to change the actual finish on the miniatures. So now the weathering, the stage that I was hoping was going to tie the miniatures together, elevate them to be an interesting thing to look at on the table. So first up, I'm using a couple of enamel products. Now, I adore enamel washes. I love the effects that they give you. I very, very rarely use them because they absolutely stink and they give me a real headache. But tiny areas in the model, I thought it's okay. Use them on this, it'll look great. And this is a little mix I've been using recently when I've been doing things like tracks on tanks and stuff, where we take a darker red-brown colour tracks wash in this case, and then we sort of stipple on whilst it's still wet the much, much lighter orange colour. And this over the typhus corrosion, I think looks amazing. And was a really good take-home from this whole project, actually. So now I just got some dark brown oil paint made up a wash, some of my copper oxide coloured oil paint made up a wash, a rusty colour made up a wash, and then I had a little dish of just plain mineral spirits to sort of clean my brush in between. And I picked up the miniatures individually and then I just worked on them exactly as I'm showing you here, trying to bring areas of interest and definition and dirt and grime to the miniature. So I can't try and bring it to life a bit. You don't need to worry about oil paints and stuff reacting with what's underneath it. As long as all the paint is dry, nothing's going to be interacting with the acrylic layer. Yes, it has a layer of the matte varnish on through an airbrush, but from a protection point of view, that's doing barely nothing. It's a very thin airbrush layer. It's not doing any protection, but it doesn't need to. This won't react with it. So you can see I'm getting that desired effect with the turquoise lights oil on the sort of brass parts of the armour. And then, you know, some nice effects with the rusty bits. And then I've just gone on to a handful of the models, and where there's a really obvious panel, I've put a few more deliberate streaks on there. Again, using the same oil paints, but I'm using them neat. So much like we did earlier when we did that flicking it onto the model, just got them on a little piece of cardboard. I'm just drawing down a few streaks here and there. Very, very deliberate, very stylized, not remotely realistic, but I felt important to just add a dash more interest to certain areas of the model. As I said much earlier on, I should have just done this stage. You know, I should have skipped that industrial wash all over and just gone straight to this, and I'd have been absolutely fine. So it's time for the finishing touches. Now, I'm not going to touch on basing. The basing is the same I've done for the Harakoni Warhawks. I'm going to do all my kill teams the same basing, and the full basing thing for that you can see in the Harakoni video or the Solar Auxiliary video. But this is where the model sits. It's all kind of one finish at the moment. The oils obviously give a fairly matte finish, and we airbrushed it as well with that matte. So I want to go back in now and start playing with the contrast of finish. So add in some satin, add in some gloss effects, essentially, again, just to make it that little bit more exciting on the table. Gimmicks, you know, and there's nothing wrong with gimmicks, you know, if used sparingly, in my opinion. So for the little bits of goo that, again, are on some models and not others, and even in this picture, I've I've just noticed now I'd clearly forgotten to do the drippy bits coming down from the boils. So yeah, wonderful. Anyway, we're going with the Plaguebearer Flesh. That gives them that finish that contrast paint gives us, that slightly satin finish. Now I'm going to go in with pure gloss varnish onto the boils. I only have one gloss varnish. I'm just thinned it down on my palette here with loads of water. And I'm just giving a nice sort of thin layer of that on the boils. Again, being really careful here, because if I get this place I don't want it, immediately we lose the impact because it just looks messy. And I also went for glossy black lenses. I love glossy black lenses and glossy black eyes. And at this point of the project, I sort of retreated into myself, falling back on tropes, and was just like, do you know what? I'm just going to do whatever I want. Whatever it looks like will be, what will be, will be. And then I just want to go back and bring a tiny bit of shine back to the metals. Not loads, because we want them to be really dull, but a little bit of shine on some of the edges is worthwhile. So a brass colour, a silver colour, it really doesn't matter. Just to bring that. I think it was lead belcher and Victorian brass, if you really care. And then for the plague weapons, I used a very, very bright silver. Again, just to give us that quite extreme contrast to the two, and very, very carefully just ran that along the edges of them. Super, super careful at this stage, particularly because that typhus corrosion has put a lot of texture, physical texture onto that, which we don't want to necessarily pick up. We just want to pick up the edges of the blades and the mace and the things like that. But I think a really worthwhile stage, that. There we have them, all done and based. Whew. Yeah. I started out with the project. I wanted to see if I could adapt my painting style to do more speed painting. See if I could improve it. You remember if I did a Skaven video a few months back where I tried a bit of speed painting on it. And unfortunately, I think my conclusion is that as much as I want to try to find ways to speed up my painting, I just don't want to. I just do not get that satisfaction from painting the models really, really quickly. I completely understand why people do it, but it's not for me. And I think I will probably stop trying to now, and actually slow painting is something I enjoy, and the process is worth it to me. I would rather not paint the model than paint it quickly, I think is where I'm at. Maybe I'm picking the wrong projects. Maybe I'm not taking the right approach with them. But if I'm being brutally honest with you, I don't think I want to. I don't think I want to go and change that dramatically to achieve that. When I look back on things over the last few weeks, I've painted stuff like the Bone, stuff like the Harakoni Warhawks, the Infinity models. They've been perfectly fast. They've been gaming level, knock them out in a month kind of thing for a kill team. I think it's perfectly reasonable. I don't necessarily want to do a kill team in a couple of days. I just don't have that desire within me to do it. But I also am really glad to have reached that point and that decision. Also, someone mentioned in our Discord a little while ago that they were really nervous about sharing their work because they felt like everyone in there was a really great painter, and they were really nervous about putting their work up because it was embarrassing and all the rest of it. Please, please, please don't be afraid to try new things and share your stuff. Please don't be afraid to fail. You will discover so many new techniques, so many more enjoyable things that you can add to your painting arsenal, as well as just reaffirm things that you currently enjoy and actually you do fall back on because you love them. Because, at the end of the day, this is a wonderful hobby. It's a relaxing hobby. Yes, there's stressful elements. Yes, you have to have commitment, to get things done. But it should be, enjoyable. And I would hate for people to not do stuff because they are just bombarded by what they consider much, much higher level hobby. Everybody struggles with what they do. It's not meant to sound preachy. I'm sure it's come across a bit, but that post in the Discord really sort of got to me, because I would hate people to feel like that. And look, you could be worse. You could have a YouTube channel with tens of thousands of people watching you, and you muck up on a really long video, which maybe some of them are still sat listening to. But yeah, if you are, I hope you have enjoyed it. I am determined to continue with the Kill Team videos. I think I will do it more in the style of the Harakoni one, where I will paint a handful of the miniatures from the set to a level that I'm happy with. And then if I really like the Kill Team, my intentions will be to try and finish that Kill Team before I do the following one. And I can show you the results for that in the next video, just to sort of put my money where my mouth is and say that this is a sort of high gaming standard paint jobs that we are going for. So yeah, a ton of fun, no regrets at all. Love the kit bashing. It's really lit a fire under me. That's something I want to go and make sure I do plenty more of. Please let me know down in the comments what other kill teams you'd like me to take a look at. Obviously, I'm going to try and paint the new ones when they come out. If they get sent through to us, great. If they don't and I love them, I will still be picking them up and painting them for the channel. But equally, there's a ton of incredible kill teams out there already. So if there's stuff you'd like to see, let me know and I will really try to schedule it and get to it all. As I say, at least one a month, I think is where I want to be going with the kill team stuff. If you have any questions about anything I've done in the video, please pop them down in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you ever so much for your support. Those of you over on Patreon are the only reason we're able to do these videos and the videos over there each week and the podcast and the MPO and the miniatures range, including the Kickstarter coming out in a couple of weeks' time. We hugely appreciate you. But likes, subscribes, comments, shares on the YouTube video make a massive difference and we absolutely appreciate every single one of those as well. So take care and I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com and maybe Ben can sort you out.